The man on the phone said he had bought my grandfather's Mustang from my brother 3 days earlier. Then he said he had found something hidden under the back seat. And then, in a voice that sounded careful but unsettled, he asked, "Are you Nora Vale?" I was standing barefoot in my kitchen in Columbia, Missouri, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier. I was 35, worked insurance claims for a regional auto company, and had spent most of my adult life learning how to hear a lie before the person telling it realized they were caught. Still, when that man said my name, I felt 12 years old again. "My name is Daniel Pike," he said. "I restore classic cars. Your brother sold me a 1967 Mustang, Highland green, white interior. He said it belonged to him." I closed my eyes. My grandfather's Mustang. Not just a car. Not in our family. The Mustang had been in our driveway for as long as I could remember, usually under a faded gray cover beside Grandpa Arthur's garage. It smelled like old leather engine oil and the peppermint mints he kept in the ashtray, even though he had quit smoking before I was born. When I was little, Grandpa would lift me onto the passenger seat, hand me a rag, and tell me every good thing took maintenance. People forget that he used to say, rubbing a thumb over the chrome Mustang emblem. They think love, family, money, trust. They think it all runs forever if they just own it. Then, he would look toward the house where my mother was usually making excuses for my brother. But nothing does. My brother Gavin was 3 years older than me, and had spent most of his life being forgiven before he ever apologized. He was charming when he needed something, wounded when someone said no, and angry whenever consequences showed up with his name on them. My mother called him sensitive. My father, before he died, called him misunderstood. Grandpa called him dangerous when he was desperate. No one liked that word. Especially Gavin. "What did you find?" I asked Daniel. There was a pause long enough for me to hear a compressor running somewhere behind him. Then metal clinked against concrete. "I was pulling the rear bench to check for rust," he said. "There was a canvas pouch pushed beneath the springs. Old thing. Tied with a bootlace. I almost threw it away." My fingers tightened around the coffee mug. What was in it? A key, some papers, and a letter. My heartbeat became loud enough that I barely heard the refrigerator humming behind me. A letter from who? Your grandfather, I think. The handwriting matches the service records he kept in the glove compartment. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. Grandpa had died 11 months earlier. The funeral had been crowded, loud, and somehow lonely. People came out of respect for the man who fixed engines for half the county, who pulled strangers from snowbanks, who showed up at every school recital even when nobody asked him to. But after the church basement emptied and the casseroles were packed away, the only thing my family talked about was the Mustang. Not his tools. Not his photographs. Not the old house with the porch where he taught me how to shell peas. The car. Gavin had waited until the night before the funeral to say Grandpa had given it to him. He said it casually, like he was mentioning a jacket somebody had left behind. Mom had been washing dishes at my grandfather's sink. She turned around with a plate still dripping in her hands and said, "Arthur told Gavin months ago. He wanted him to have it." I remember looking at her and thinking she sounded rehearsed. Grandpa had been sick the last year of his life, but his mind had stayed sharp. He remembered birthdays, VIN numbers, baseball scores from 1987, and every single time Gavin had borrowed money and failed to repay it. The idea that he would quietly hand Gavin the one thing he protected more carefully than his own pride never made sense. But everyone wanted the house quiet. And I had spent my whole life being the person who kept things quiet. "Did you read the letter?" I asked Daniel. "No," he said quickly. "Not all of it. I saw your name on the envelope. Then I saw enough to know I shouldn't be holding it." The kitchen seemed to tilt slightly beneath me. "What did you see?" He exhaled through his nose. "It said, for Nora, if Gavin finally sells what was never his." For a moment I could not speak. The words landed in my chest with the force of something physical. Not because I was surprised Grandpa had worried about Gavin. Everyone who truly knew him had worried about Gavin. But because Grandpa had expected this. He had expected Gavin to sell the Mustang. He had expected the family to let him. And somehow, he had expected me to be the one left standing after it happened. "I need to see it," I said. Daniel was quiet again. Then he said, "I figured you would. I'm not trying to keep the car from you, Miss Vale. I paid for it. I have paperwork." But I don't like the feeling I got when I saw that note. What paperwork? A title. A bill of sale. Your brother said he had inherited it. The word inherited made my throat tighten. Grandpa had never left a formal will. He had always said he had no fortune worth fighting over, only a house with a leaky roof a few acres behind it and tools nobody but him knew how to use. After he died, my mother handled most of the paperwork because she lived closest. I offered to help, but she told me it was unnecessary. Everything is simple, she said. That was the sentence she always used when something was not simple at all. Gavin had shown up at the funeral in a black shirt that did not fit him, smelling faintly of cologne and stale cigarette smoke. He hugged my mother too long and cried into her shoulder where everyone could see him. Then, before the coffee had even been poured, he asked where Grandpa kept the keys. I watched him from across the room. He caught my eye and gave me a look I had known since childhood. It said, "Don't start." Later that night, when I asked him directly if Grandpa had given him the car, Gavin leaned against the garage door and laughed once. You really think Grandpa loved you more because he let you hold a wrench? He trusted me. He trusted everyone, until they disappointed him. That isn't an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Then he stepped closer, lowered his voice, and said the thing that stayed with me for months. You always wanted something that proved you mattered more than me. I remember looking at him in that cold garage under the fluorescent light Grandpa hated, and realizing Gavin believed that. He believed every boundary Grandpa had set was an insult. Every consequence was a betrayal. Every person who refused to rescue him was selfish. That was how Gavin survived himself. By making everyone else responsible for the damage. Daniel gave me an address for his restoration shop in a small industrial strip outside Jefferson City. He asked if I could come the next morning. I'll be there, I said. When I hung up, I sat in silence for almost 10 minutes. Then my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I watched her name flash across the screen until the call stopped. A minute later, a text appeared. Gavin said you called him about the car. Please don't make this ugly. I stared at it. I had not called Gavin. That meant Gavin knew Daniel had found something. Or he knew the sale was about to fall apart. I typed one sentence before deleting it. Then I typed another. What did Grandpa leave under the seat? The dots appeared almost immediately. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally her reply came through. I don't know what you think you're doing, but your brother has enough problems. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That was my mother's version of love. Gavin created a crisis, and somehow the emergency became everyone else's duty to manage. His gambling debts had been whispered about for years. There were unpaid loans, pawned tools, a landlord who once came to Grandpa's house asking for him. Each time my mother said Gavin had made a mistake. Not a choice. Not a pattern. A mistake. Grandpa had paid off 2 of Gavin's debts that I knew about, maybe more. The first time he made Gavin work in the garage all summer. The second time he made him sign a repayment agreement on a yellow legal pad. Gavin tore it up 3 weeks later. Grandpa kept the pieces in his toolbox. I knew because I was there. I was 19, home from community college for the weekend, and Grandpa had shown me the torn paper without saying a word. He laid it flat on his workbench, smoothed it with both hands, and looked at me. Never confuse being needed with being loved, he said. At the time, I thought he was talking about Gavin. Years later, I understood he was talking about my mother too. That night I barely slept. I kept seeing the Mustang in Daniel Pike's shop, its back seat pulled apart, its old leather exposed, Grandpa's hidden pouch sitting somewhere under fluorescent lights. The thought made me angry in a way I did not know how to explain. Gavin had not only sold the car, he had sold the last private piece of Grandpa that I had left. And he had probably done it thinking nobody would ever question him. At 7 the next morning, I drove toward Jefferson City with a folder on the passenger seat. Inside it were copies of every document I had from Grandpa's estate, old registration records, insurance cards, photographs, and the handwritten service log Grandpa had let me keep after he died. I did not know whether any of it would matter. But I knew what mattered to me. Facts. Dates. Paper. The things people called cold when they were terrified of what those things could prove. Daniel's shop was behind a tire warehouse with a faded blue sign that read Pike, Restoration, in cracked white letters. The garage door was open. Inside, sunlight cut across concrete floors and old cars in various states of repair. Then I saw the Mustang. It was raised slightly on a lift, stripped of its rear seat, looking exposed in a way that made my stomach turn. Daniel stepped out from behind it. He was probably in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, grease on one sleeve, tired eyes that did not look like they belonged to a man trying to cheat anyone. He held the canvas pouch in both hands. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know this isn't how you wanted to see it." I walked toward him but stopped a few feet away. The pouch was small, brown canvas, frayed around the corners. I knew it. Grandpa used to carry it on hunting trips. He kept spare bolts and a pocket knife inside. When I was 14, I had asked why he never bought a new one. "Because this one still does its job," he said. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a rusted brass key, 3 folded sheets of paper, and a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. Nora. No last name. No explanation. Just my name in Grandpa's steady handwriting. Then I saw the smaller line beneath it. "Don't let your mother talk you out of this." I did not open the envelope right away. That was the first thing Daniel noticed about me, and later he told me it was the moment he stopped thinking of this as a messy family dispute and started understanding that something heavier had been buried inside that car. Instead, I picked up the brass key. It was old, flat-headed, and stamped with a number I recognized. Grandpa had a metal cabinet in the back corner of his garage, the kind with shallow drawers and a small lock that always stuck in winter. He kept carburetor parts, invoices, old manuals, and anything he thought someone might need after he was gone. The cabinet had disappeared after the funeral. My mother told me she had donated it. "I thought it was mostly junk," she said. But Grandpa did not keep junk. He kept records. I turned the key over in my palm and felt something cold settle beneath my ribs. The papers had been folded into thirds and tied with a faded piece of red string. One was a photocopy of an old title, one was a repair invoice. The third was a signed agreement dated 4 years earlier. At the top in Grandpa's handwriting were 6 words. 1967. Mustang held in trust. My breath caught. Daniel stood beside me without speaking. He had the careful posture of someone who worked around expensive things and knew when not to touch them. I unfolded the agreement. It was not formal in the polished, attorney-written way people imagine when they hear the word trust. Grandpa had typed it on an old portable typewriter. The letters were uneven in places, but it had been signed in front of 2 witnesses, his longtime mechanic friend Walter Briggs and a woman named Irene Sutter who had worked at the county records office for almost 30 years. The agreement said Grandpa was holding the Mustang for me. Not giving it to me someday. Holding it for me. It explained that after my father died, Grandpa wanted one asset kept outside the reach of family pressure, debt coercion, or emotional manipulation. Those were his exact words. The car would become mine when I turned 35 unless he decided I was not ready to care for it. I had turned 35 6 months earlier. The agreement had never been mentioned. Not once. At the bottom of the page, Grandpa had added a note in blue ink. "If Gavin claims the car, he is lying. If your mother defends him, she is afraid of what he will do without someone to save him." I read it twice. Then a third time. There are moments when anger does not come loudly. It does not slam doors or make you shake. Sometimes it simply rearranges your understanding of every room you have ever stood in. I thought about my mother standing in Grandpa's kitchen telling me the Mustang was simple. I thought about Gavin smirking in the garage and saying I wanted proof that I mattered more than him. He knew. Maybe not every detail, maybe not about the trust, but he knew the car was never his. And he sold it anyway. Daniel walked to a workbench and returned with another document. "This was in the pouch too," he said. It was a copy of the Mustang's certificate of title, older than the one Gavin had given him. Grandpa's name was on it, but there was a handwritten assignment on the back. The date was from 8 months before Grandpa died. The vehicle was being transferred to the Arthur Vale Restoration Trust. And beneath it, printed in small letters, was my name as beneficiary. I stared at the page until the words blurred. "That title he gave me," Daniel said quietly, "was clean-looking. Too clean. I thought it had been reissued. But now I'm wondering." "You bought it from Gavin?" "Yes. He came in with the title, a bill of sale, and a story about needing cash for a move. He said his grandfather had always wanted him to restore it, but he didn't have the time. I looked at the Mustang. Its paint still carried the small scar on the rear quarter panel where Grandpa had backed into a fence when I was 16. He had laughed about it for years. Said it gave the car character. Gavin had sold that scar. The smell of the seats, the cracked radio knob. The car, Grandpa took me to get ice cream in after my father's funeral because neither of us knew what else to do. He had sold all of it for cash. How much, I asked. Daniel hesitated. 22,000. The number hit me harder than I expected. Not because the Mustang was worth more, it was, but because I knew Gavin. 22,000 could disappear through his hands in a month. A week, if he was desperate enough. Did he mention debts? Daniel's expression changed slightly. He mentioned being in a hurry. That was enough. I took the envelope with my name on it and held it against my chest. The paper felt thin, almost fragile, but I knew better than to confuse fragile with weak. Grandpa had taught me that too. Can I read this privately? I asked. Daniel nodded. There's an office upstairs. His office smelled like dust, old coffee and rubber. A small fan turned in the corner. Through the window, I could see the Mustang below me stripped open under bright light. I sat at his desk and slid my finger under the envelope flap. Inside was one sheet of paper. My grandfather's handwriting was steadier than I expected. He had written it before the illness made his hands tremble. Nora. If you are reading this, Gavin did what I was afraid he would do. I am sorry you had to be the one to find out this way. I am not leaving you the Mustang because you are my favorite. I am leaving it to you because you understand that taking care of something is not the same as owning it. You showed me that when you were 17 and spent your whole summer helping me rebuild the transmission after your father died. You did not ask what you would get. You only asked what needed doing. That is why it is yours. Your mother may tell you Gavin needs it more. She may tell you he has suffered. She may tell you this is family. Listen carefully, need does not create entitlement. Pain does not excuse theft. Family is not a word people get to use after they have treated you like storage for their guilt. Do not fight to keep peace with people who only feel peaceful when you are giving something up. The key opens the cabinet. The papers inside will tell you what to do. Love, Grandpa. I read the letter once. Then I pressed it flat against the desk with both hands because I could not bear the idea of folding it again. My grandfather had known me better than anyone else in my family. That was the comfort. It was also the wound. He had known I would be asked to sacrifice for Gavin. He had known my mother would make that sacrifice sound noble. And he had known I might still be tempted to do it. By the time I walked back down to the garage, Daniel had put the rear seat loosely back into place. He was not trying to hide anything, he was trying to give the car dignity. I appreciated that. I want to make this right, he said. I don't want a car that was sold fraudulently. You paid for it in good faith. I did, but that doesn't make it mine. The sentence was so simple I almost cried. For years, Gavin had built his life around the opposite idea. If he wanted something badly enough, if he got there first, if he made everyone tired enough to stop arguing, then it became his. He treated exhaustion like consent. Daniel looked at the documents in my hand. What happens next? I worked insurance claims. I knew how to think in steps when everything inside me wanted to collapse. We verify the trust. We verify the title history. We report the fraudulent transfer. And until then, the Mustang stays here. Daniel nodded. Done. I called Walter Briggs from the shop parking lot. He answered on the second ring with a gravelly, irritated hello, as if he had been waiting all morning for someone to bother him. Walter, I said. It's Nora Vale. There was a pause. Then his voice softened. Arthur's girl. I had not heard anyone call me that since Grandpa died. I told him about the pouch, the letter, the trust agreement, the car. I expected surprise. Instead, he sighed. I wondered when that boy would make his move. You knew. Your granddad made me witness the paperwork. Said Gavin would either steal the Mustang or guilt somebody into handing it over. Arthur was stubborn, but he wasn't blind. My throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Because Arthur told me not to unless the car went missing. He wanted you to have a chance to live your life without carrying another one of Gavin's disasters on your back. That hurt more than it should have. Because that was exactly what I had spent years doing anyway. Walter told me the cabinet was not donated. It had been moved into a storage unit under Grandpa's name, paid for through the end of the year. He had helped my mother move it there after the funeral because she said she needed space. She told me you knew, Walter said. Of course she did. I stood in the parking lot with the morning sun warming the top of my head and felt the world become very still. My mother had not just protected Gavin. She had lied to Walter. She had hidden the cabinet. She had let me believe Grandpa left nothing for me, because it was easier than admitting she was afraid of what the truth would cost her golden son. I thanked Walter, hung up, and called my mother. She answered immediately. Nora, thank God, I've been worried sick. Where is Grandpa's metal cabinet? Silence. The kind that tells you the answer before the person speaks. What cabinet? The one from his garage. The one you said you donated. My mother exhaled slowly. Why are you bringing this up now? Because Gavin sold the Mustang. Her voice changed. Not into shock, into caution. He said he was handling it. He sold it to a restoration shop for $22,000, using a fraudulent title. Nora, don't use words like fraudulent. You don't know everything. I know the car was held in trust for me. This time, she did not answer at all. I could hear television in the background, a game show audience clapping. The sound made me feel sick. Nora, she said, finally, your brother is going through a hard time. He stole from Grandpa. He made a mistake. He forged documents. He needed money. And I needed someone in this family to tell the truth. Her voice sharpened. Don't do this. Don't turn it into a war. I looked across the lot at Daniel's shop, at the old blue sign at the open garage door framing Grandpa's car. I didn't turn it into a war, I said. Gavin did when he sold something he knew wasn't his. My mother began crying then. Not loud crying, controlled crying. The kind she used when she wanted me to feel cruel for being calm. You have no idea what he's dealing with, she said. You're right, I answered. Because no one ever tells me the truth until I find it myself. Then I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I did not stay on the line to comfort her. An hour later, my phone lit up with Gavin's name. I watched it ring. Then again. Then again. Finally, a voicemail appeared. His voice was tight and angry, but underneath it was something else. Fear. Nora, call me back. Mom said you're making a huge deal out of this. I sold a car. That's it. Grandpa wanted me to have it. You know that. Stop trying to punish me, because you've always been jealous. I listened to the message twice. Then I saved it. Not because I needed proof of his voice. Because I needed to remember that even now, even after the hidden letter, the stolen title, the trust agreement, he still believed his best defense was to accuse me of wanting too much. That afternoon, Walter met me at the storage facility outside town. The unit door groaned when he lifted it. Inside, beneath a tarp and 3 boxes of old shop manuals, stood Grandpa's metal cabinet. Exactly where my mother had left it. Exactly where she hoped I would never look. Walter handed me the brass key. I slid it into the lock. For a second it resisted. Then it turned. The first drawer held receipts, spark plugs, and a packet of photographs bound with a rubber band that had dried hard with age. The second held manuals, old registration cards, and a yellowed envelope marked in Grandpa's handwriting, Gavin, last time. I stood there with the cabinet open, and Walter beside me, feeling as though I had stepped into a room Grandpa had built specifically for the moment everyone else failed me. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check stub for $12,000 dated 4 years earlier. The payee was Morrow Financial Recovery. I recognized the name immediately. It was the company that had called my mother once years ago while I was visiting asking for Gavin. She had hung up, stared at the wall, and told me not to worry about grown-up problems. Under the check stub was a document titled Acknowledgement of Debt Payment and Release of Claim. It was only 2 pages long, but every sentence landed heavily. Grandpa had agreed to pay Gavin's debt directly. In return, Gavin acknowledged that the Mustang belonged solely to Grandpa and that he had no present or future ownership interest, right of possession, authority to transfer, or authority to represent ownership of it. Gavin had signed it. My mother had signed it too. Not as an owner, as a witness. For several seconds I could not move. I just stared at her name. Marlene Vale, the same looping handwriting I had seen on birthday cards, grocery lists, and every text message telling me to be patient with my brother because he was trying. She had not been confused. She had not been misled. She had watched Gavin sign away any claim to the Mustang years before Grandpa died. Then she had stood in Grandpa's kitchen after the funeral and told me he had wanted Gavin to have it. Walter leaned against the storage unit wall, his face drawn tight. Arthur showed me that agreement after Gavin signed it, he said. He said your mother was going to keep calling it a fresh start until the boy ran out of other people's money. I swallowed hard. Why did she let him do this? Walter looked down at the concrete floor. Because some people get so used to protecting one person that they start believing everyone else can take the hit. There were more papers beneath the release. Grandpa had kept copies of everything: the trust agreement, the original title assignment, a handwritten ledger listing repairs, mileage, insurance renewals, and the exact date the Mustang had been moved into the trust. He had even written down where the spare key was hidden, along with a note that made my chest tighten. Nora knows what this car means. Gavin only knows what it can buy. I read that sentence until the ink seemed to darken on the page. Then I found something else. A letter from the Missouri Department of Revenue dated 2 weeks after Grandpa's funeral. It notified the registered owner that someone had requested a replacement title for the Mustang. The request had been flagged because the vehicle had a pending trust transfer on record. The letter had been mailed to Grandpa's house. My mother had received it. And she had hidden it in a drawer. I sat on the floor beside the cabinet with the papers spread around me. The storage unit smelled like dust and old cardboard. Somewhere across the facility, a roll-up door slammed shut. I remember thinking how ordinary everything sounded, while my entire family history was rearranging itself in front of me. The truth was no longer a suspicion. It had dates, signatures, a state notice, a debt payment, a release Gavin had signed in his own hand. I called Irene Sutter before I let myself call anyone else. She answered from what sounded like a grocery store parking lot, and when I explained what I had found, she went silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Arthur told me he was afraid of exactly this, she said finally. He wanted the trust recorded before he got too sick to handle it. Did he tell my mother? Yes. The answer came too quickly. He told her in my office, Irene continued. She was there when he filed the paperwork. She argued with him, said he was punishing Gavin. Arthur told her he was protecting you from a future argument. I closed my eyes. Grandpa had not been vague. He had not been careless. He had warned her. He had put everything in writing. And somehow my mother had still decided Gavin's need for money mattered more than my right to the truth. Irene asked me to send her photographs of the documents. She said the title transfer record would be easy to verify, and that the duplicate title Gavin used might have involved false statements. Her voice was calm, professional, and careful. But I could hear anger beneath it. Do not sign anything, she said. Do not agree to anything over the phone. And do not let that car leave Mr. Pike's shop. I won't. You've spent a long time letting them define what keeping the peace means, haven't you? The question caught me off guard. Yes, I said. Well, Irene replied, peace built on a lie is just silence with better furniture. By the time I got home that evening, Gavin had called 8 times. He had sent 3 texts. The first said, call me. Now. The second said, MOM is losing it. This isn't fair. The third said, you don't get to destroy my life over a car. I stood in my hallway with my purse still on my shoulder and stared at the words until something inside me went still. That was Gavin's gift. He could steal, lie, sell, borrow, disappear, and somehow make the person confronting him feel guilty for the inconvenience of his consequences. For years I had argued with the version of him that existed in my mind. The little boy who cried when Dad died. The teenager who never learned how to handle disappointment. The grown man who always seemed one apology away from becoming better. But the documents in Grandpa's cabinet had given me something more valuable than anger. They had given me clarity. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. There you are, he snapped. What the hell are you doing? I found Grandpa's cabinet. The silence that followed was immediate and sharp. Then Gavin laughed, but it sounded wrong, thin. So, I found the release you signed. His breathing changed. I continued before he could interrupt. The one from when Grandpa paid $12,000 toward your debt. The one that says you had no right to claim the Mustang. Mom witnessed it. Nora, that was years ago. Yes. You don't understand what that was about. I understand it perfectly. He lowered his voice. You've always wanted a reason to hate me. No. I wanted a reason to believe you. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Gavin said I needed the money. There it was. No denial. No confusion. Just the old excuse stripped down to its ugliest form. I know, I said. That doesn't make it yours. You have a good job. You have savings. You don't know what it's like when people are coming after you. I know what it's like to have people expect me to fix problems I didn't create. His voice rose. You think you're better than me, because you've got your little stable life. No, I said quietly. I think I'm tired of being punished for not destroying mine. He hung up. My mother came to my house the next morning. She did not knock at first. She rang the bell twice, then started pounding against the door with the flat of her hand. When I opened it, she looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was pulled back badly. Her eyes were swollen. For 1 second I almost reached for her. Then she said, "You need to stop this before Gavin does something reckless." And the feeling passed. He already did something reckless, I said. He sold a car he didn't own. He's scared. So was Grandpa when he hid those papers. Her face crumpled. Your grandfather was cruel to him. I looked at her for a long moment. Cruel. He made Gavin feel like a failure. He always favored you. He made everything about responsibility and work and paying people back. Gavin never had a chance to feel accepted. The words were so familiar that they almost sounded rehearsed. I had heard versions of them my whole life. Grandpa was too hard. Dad expected too much. Gavin had a different heart. Gavin needed more support. No one ever said what that support cost. No one said whose life was quietly being spent to keep him comfortable. Mom, I said he sold Grandpa's Mustang using a title he should never have had. She looked away. That does not make him a victim. She wiped at her face. What do you want from me? The question was almost enough to break me. Because for years, I had wanted something simple. I wanted her to look at me and say, "You were right. You deserved better. I should have protected you too." Instead, she stood in my doorway waiting for instructions as though accountability were another emergency I had to manage for her. I want you to tell the truth, I said. Her mouth tightened. I can't testify against my own son. You don't have to testify against him. You just have to stop lying for him. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw fear in her face. Not fear of Gavin's anger. Fear of who she would be if she admitted she had spent decades choosing him at everyone else's expense. I did what I thought a mother was supposed to do, she whispered. No, I said. You did what made you feel needed. She left without another word. That afternoon, Daniel called me from the restoration shop. He had spoken with a lawyer he knew through the local car club, mostly to protect himself from getting caught between us. The lawyer had advised him not to release the Mustang to anyone until the title issue was resolved. Daniel sounded embarrassed when he said it. I don't want you to think I'm hiding behind paperwork. I don't, I told him. Paperwork is the only reason I know what happened. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, Your brother came by. My hand tightened around the phone. What did he say? He said you were emotionally unstable after your grandfather's death. Said you were trying to take something your family gave him. Of course he did. Did he threaten you? No. But he asked if I would take cash to walk away from the deal. That part surprised me. How much? More than he sold the car for. I felt a cold line run down my spine. Gavin did not have more than $22,000, not unless someone had given it to him, or unless he was trying to borrow against something else. Either way, he was panicking. Daniel continued. I told him there was no deal until the title gets sorted out. He got angry. Said his family would handle you. My throat went tight. His family. That's what he said. I looked around my quiet living room. At the framed picture of Grandpa and me beside the fireplace. At the old wooden chair he had repaired 3 times because I refused to let anyone throw it out. Then I understood something that should have been obvious years ago. Gavin did not mean family as a source of love. He meant family as a shield. That evening I called my Aunt Denise, my father's younger sister. She had stayed mostly out of the mess since Dad died, but she had loved Grandpa in a way that did not require excuses. I told her what I had found. I sent her photographs of the release, the trust, and the state notice. She read them in silence. Then she said, "Your grandfather tried to prevent this because he knew your mother would fold." "I know." "No," she said. "You know now. But you were a child when this started." Her voice softened. "You do not have to keep carrying the blame for adults who chose the easier lie." The next morning Irene called with confirmation. The trust had been properly recorded. The replacement title Gavin presented to Daniel was not simply questionable, it had been issued through a false declaration stating that Grandpa had lost the original title while alive. The form had been signed 9 days after Grandpa died. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the date. 9 days. 9 days after we buried him, Gavin had started the process of taking the car. While my mother was still accepting casseroles from neighbors. While I was sorting through sympathy cards. While Grandpa's porch light was still on because none of us had remembered to turn it off. Irene said the records would be sent to the state's title investigation unit. She warned me that the process could take time, but the fraudulent transfer was already enough to stop Gavin from making any claim that he had acted innocently. I thanked her and hung up. Then I opened a new message to my brother. I wrote only one sentence. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at Pike Restoration. Bring Mom." He replied less than a minute later. "You really want to humiliate me in front of strangers?" I looked at the message, then typed back. "No. I want you to hear the truth in front of people you can't control." For the first time, Gavin did not answer. The next morning, I dressed in a plain navy blouse, dark jeans, and the boots Grandpa had bought me when I got my first job at the insurance office. They were not stylish, they were sturdy. He had said every woman needed one pair of shoes that reminded her she could stand wherever she had to stand. I placed the trust documents, the release, the state notice, and Grandpa's letter into a leather folder. Then I added one more thing. The photograph of Grandpa sitting behind the wheel of the Mustang, smiling at something outside the frame. On the back he had written, "Keep what matters. Let go of what only hurts." At 9:52 I pulled into Daniel Pike's lot. The Mustang was parked in front of the garage door, gleaming under the late morning sun. My mother's sedan was already there. Gavin's truck arrived seconds after mine, tires crunching hard over the gravel. He stepped out, looking furious. But he was not alone. Behind him came my mother, Aunt Denise, Daniel, Walter Briggs, and a woman I had never met before carrying a slim black case and a state badge clipped to her jacket. Gavin saw her too. For the first time since this began, he stopped walking. Then he looked at me across Grandpa's Mustang. And I knew he had finally understood that this was not a family argument anymore. The woman with the state badge introduced herself as Samantha Kemp from the Missouri Title Investigation Unit. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her calm made the whole lot feel smaller. Gavin looked at Daniel first, then at me. "You called the state over a family car?" "No," Samantha said before I could answer. "The state became involved when a replacement title application was submitted after the registered owner's death, using a declaration that appears inconsistent with recorded ownership documents." Gavin's face changed. Just slightly. But I saw it. My mother stepped forward with both hands clenched around her purse. "There has to be some misunderstanding. Arthur talked about giving Gavin that car for years." Samantha looked at her with the kind of polite attention that made people reveal more than they intended. "Did Arthur Vale ever transfer legal ownership of the vehicle to Gavin Vale?" she asked. My mother opened her mouth. Then closed it. Gavin answered for her. "He wanted me to have it. Everybody knew that." Walter Briggs made a low sound in his throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite disgust. "Everybody knew the opposite," he said. Gavin turned on him. "You don't know anything about my family." Walter did not flinch. "I knew your grandfather 40 years. I knew exactly what he worried about." The words landed hard. Gavin looked at me again, but this time there was no smugness in his face, only calculation. He was trying to decide which lie might still work. Samantha opened the slim black case she carried. Inside were copies of the trust record, the original title assignment, the duplicate title application, and a photograph of Gavin's signature on the false declaration. This form states that Arthur Vale personally reported the original title lost, she said. It was signed 9 days after his death. Gavin's jaw tightened. That doesn't mean I filled it out. It was filed using your identification information, Samantha replied, and the signature matches your driver's license record. My mother made a small, broken sound beside him. Gavin did not look at her. He looked at me. You did this, he said. I held the leather folder against my side. You sold a car that wasn't yours. You wanted it. That's what this is. You always wanted Grandpa to choose you. For years, that sentence would have done exactly what he meant for it to do. It would have pulled me backward into explaining myself. I would have listed all the times I had helped Grandpa, all the weekends in the garage, all the reasons the Mustang mattered. I would have tried to make Gavin understand that I was not competing with him. But I was not 12 anymore. And I was tired of defending love to people who only understood possession. Grandpa didn't choose me over you, I said. He protected something from you. The silence afterward was so complete that I could hear a car passing on the highway beyond the warehouse. Gavin stepped closer. You think you're so calm because you have everyone on your side now. No, I said. I'm calm because I finally have the truth on mine. I took Grandpa's letter from the folder and unfolded it slowly. My hands did not shake. That surprised me more than anything. I'm not reading this to embarrass you, I said. I'm reading it because Grandpa wrote it for this day. Gavin's face went pale. My mother whispered, Nora, please. I looked at her once, just once. Then I read the line Grandpa had written in blue ink. Need does not create entitlement. Pain does not excuse theft. Family is not a word people get to use after they have treated you like storage for their guilt. My mother covered her mouth. Gavin's eyes flashed. That old man hated me. No, I said. He kept trying to save you. You just kept calling it hate because he wouldn't let you take whatever you wanted. Samantha asked Gavin whether he wanted to make a statement. He laughed bitterly and looked toward the Mustang as though it had betrayed him too. I sold a car, he said. I didn't rob a bank. No, Samantha replied. But you may have made false statements on state records, transferred property you did not own, and accepted payment under false pretenses. The amount involved makes this more serious than you seem to understand. For the first time, Gavin looked frightened. Not sad. Not remorseful. Frightened. There was a difference. Daniel stood beside the Mustang with his arms folded. He had stayed quiet through most of it, but now he looked directly at Gavin. You told me the car was yours, he said. You told me your grandfather wanted you to restore it. Gavin tried to shrug. That was basically true. Daniel's expression hardened. No, it wasn't. He pulled a folded bill of sale from his back pocket. You also told me you were selling because you were moving for work. I called the number you gave me for your employer. They said you never worked there. Gavin looked away. Daniel continued. You came back yesterday and tried to buy the car from me for more than I paid. You didn't want the Mustang. You wanted this gone. That was the moment my mother finally looked at Gavin, the way I had been looking at him for years. Not as her scared son. Not as the boy who needed saving. As a grown man who had built an entire life around making other people carry the consequences of his choices. Her face folded in on itself. Gavin, she said softly, tell me you didn't do all of this. He did not answer. That hurt her more than any confession could have. Aunt Denise stepped closer to my mother but did not touch her. She only said, You knew about the trust. My mother looked at the ground. I knew Arthur had paperwork, she whispered. I didn't understand all of it. You signed the debt release, I said. Her shoulders sagged. I thought he would pay it back. You said that 4 years ago too. I thought he would change. The anger in me did not disappear when she said it, but something else came in beside it. A kind of grief. My mother had spent so long believing hope was the same thing as help that she had let hope become an excuse for every lie. She looked at me with tears running down her face. I was trying to keep him from falling apart. And you let me disappear instead, I said. She flinched. I had not planned that sentence. It came from somewhere deeper than anger, somewhere old. You always told me to be stronger, because Gavin needed more, I continued. You told me to understand because he was struggling. You told me to forgive because he was family, but every time you protected him, you taught him I would be the one expected to lose. My mother began crying harder then. I did not move to comfort her. That was the boundary. Samantha collected copies of the documents and told Gavin he would receive formal instructions from the state. She explained that Daniel could pursue civil recovery for the money he paid and that ownership of the Mustang would be resolved through the trust record and estate documentation. Gavin stared at the ground for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, "So what now? You get the car and I lose everything." I thought of the $22,000, the gambling debts, the forged title, the years of excuses, the people he had used up and called selfish when they finally said no. "You didn't lose everything because of me," I said. "You lost control of the story you were telling." He laughed once, bitter and exhausted. Then he walked back toward his truck. My mother called his name. He did not turn around. For a moment I watched him stand beside the driver's door with one hand on the handle. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not because I felt powerful, because for the first time, no one was rushing in to make his choices disappear. He got into the truck and drove away. No dramatic speech. No apology. Just gravel spinning under his tires. Daniel waited until the sound faded before he spoke. "I want to make something clear," he said. "I'm not keeping the Mustang." I looked at him. "You paid for it." "I paid Gavin. That doesn't mean I bought it from the owner." He glanced at Samantha, who nodded slightly. "We'll do the paperwork properly," he continued. "The car stays here until the title clears. After that it goes to you. I'll deal with Gavin over the money." "I can't let you lose $22,000, I said. Daniel gave me a tired smile. "You're not making me lose it." He did. There it was again. A sentence so simple it almost felt foreign. He did. Not me. Not Grandpa. Not my mother. Not the people who finally stopped protecting him. Gavin did. Over the next few weeks, everything moved slower than I wanted and faster than I feared. The state confirmed the trust transfer. Daniel's attorney filed a claim against Gavin for the sale proceeds. My mother gave a statement acknowledging that she had received the Department of Revenue notice after Grandpa died and failed to tell me. She did not do it because she suddenly became brave. She did it because she was finally out of places to hide. I did not forgive her right away. I did not tell her it was okay. It wasn't. But when she came to my house one evening with a box of Grandpa's things she had kept in her closet, I let her leave the box on the porch. Inside were his work gloves, a stack of handwritten repair notes, and a small framed photo of my father standing beside the Mustang when he was younger than Gavin was now. My mother had written one note. "I should have protected you too." I read it once. Then I placed it back in the box. Some apologies were not answers. Sometimes they were only the first honest thing a person had said in years. 3 months later, Daniel called me from the shop. "The title cleared," he said. "You should come by." When I arrived, the Mustang was waiting in the same bay where I had first seen it with the seat pulled apart. But it looked different now. The paint had been cleaned. The chrome had been polished. Daniel had not restored it completely, not without asking me, but he had fixed the things that needed fixing. The rear seat was back in place. The canvas pouch was gone. I kept it in a drawer at home with Grandpa's letter. Daniel handed me the keys. They were heavier than I remembered. For a moment I could not take them. Then I did. I sat behind the wheel and placed both hands on the cracked leather. The car smelled like dust, oil, and time. On the dashboard, Daniel had left a small note. "Check the ashtray." I opened it. Inside was one peppermint mint. I laughed so suddenly that I cried. Not because I was broken. Because for the first time in months, I could feel something good without waiting for someone to take it away. I drove the Mustang out of the shop slowly. The engine rumbled low beneath me, familiar and steady. At the edge of the lot, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Daniel standing by the garage door, one hand raised. Then I turned toward the highway. I did not drive to my mother's house. I did not drive to Gavin's apartment. I drove west toward the old roads Grandpa used to take when he wanted to clear his head. The kind lined with fields and gas stations and small towns where nobody knew my family's story. The wind came through the cracked window. The car pulled slightly to the right, just like it always had. And I realized something Grandpa had been trying to teach me long before he hid that letter beneath the seat. Keeping what matters is not the same as holding on to everything. Sometimes you protect the truth. Sometimes you protect your peace. And sometimes the thing that saves you is not the car someone tried to steal. It is the moment you finally stop letting people convince you that their damage is your responsibility. Grandpa's Mustang was mine because I had cared for it. But the life I built after that was mine, because I finally learned to care for myself.